Welcome to Understanding the Bible with Pastor Stephen. Today we're talking about heroes, and of course, the ultimate hero being Jesus. This is episode 15. Last time we had covered the hero King David, and I just wanted to briefly explain what the modern common definition of the word hero is. If you Google it, it's several different things: a mythological or legendary figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability, so powerful, godlike powers. That's just the basic definition of a hero. Or you could be referring to a modern day a warrior, someone skilled in honorable combat, or a person admired for their achievements and noble qualities, so someone who performs both great and noble acts. And finally, one last attribute of a hero would be one who shows great courage. And that basically means bravery despite fear or danger. So this is often a selfless act to save the life of someone else. So what is a hero? Someone with great courage who does some courageous act that would probably get most of us killed. They act with honor, nobility, and great skill for a purpose greater than themselves. So what that means, sports stars, movie stars, great speakers, inventors are not heroes. They can be idolized and they can receive, quote, hero worship, unquote, but they are not heroes. A true hero bravely risks their own life or gives their own life selflessly, courageously, and honorably. All right, let's start with Jesus' great feats. So, remember, one of the attributes of a hero is great feats, skilled feats, honorable, noble feats, great courage. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. So a lot of us know some of these stories of Jesus walking on water in Matthew 14. Incidentally, that's the point when Peter also walked on water. Then we have one of my favorites was his power over storms. In Mark 4:39, it says, "And he arose and rebuked the wind, and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly." The 12 disciples feared and said one to another, "What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Of course, we had Jesus turning water into wine in John chapter 2. That was one of his first miracles. And then raising the dead to life. John 11:41. This is the story of Lazarus. "And then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me." So here he's giving credit to God the Father, and he's saying his power comes directly from God, of course, because he was God. And when thus he had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." So that's obviously the greatest deed any man could ever do, would be to raise someone else from the dead, right? And there he's proving that power came from God and letting people know. Here's another little-known one. It's the woman with the issue of blood in Luke 8:43. Now, I personally think this is some form of failure to clot. I don't know what that disease is called. But my guess is that this, based off of the Luke being a doctor and the way that they speak about it here, probably her first menstrual cycle, she just never stopped bleeding. That's what this is. So it's a horrible catastrophe for that individual. Luke 8:43, "And a woman having an issue of blood 12 years, which had spent all her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any, came behind him and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood stopped. And Jesus said, Who touched me? When all denied, Peter and they that were with him said, Master, the multitude thronged thee and pressed thee, and you say, Who touched me? And Jesus said, Somebody has touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me. And when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came trembling, and falling down before him, she declared unto him before all the people for what cause she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately. And he said unto her, Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace. That one's a great one because it's an everyday person type problem. And what I mean by that is she was just a regular person. She wasn't a dead person. It wasn't some great miracle that was meant for everybody to see. She tried to do it in secret. The only reason we know about it is because Luke wrote it down. But then we have the feeding of the 4,000. This is not to be confused with the feeding of the 5,000 where there were 12 basketfuls left over. Apparently feeding large crowds was a common miracle of Jesus. But Matthew 15:32. Then Jesus called his disciples unto him and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they continue with me now 3 days, and have nothing to eat, and I will not send them away fasting, lest they faint in the way. And his disciples say unto him, Whence should we have so much bread in the wilderness as to fill so great a multitude? And Jesus said unto them, How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7, and a few little fishes. So we're talking 3, 4, 5 fishes, something like that, right? The other one is 5 loaves and 2 fish. So clear differences here. And he commanded the multitude to sit on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and the fishes, and gave thanks and brake them, and gave to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat and were filled, and they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets full. And they that did eat were 4,000 men, beside women and children. And he sent away the multitude, and took ship, and came unto the coasts of Magdalia. I love all of these miracles, and we could spend time on these, but I'm just showing as a hero that he did great miracles. He cared for the poor. He healed people. He raised the dead. He had power, godlike power over water and wind. Just all these things that prove, that fit the definition of a hero, okay? That's the point of this. And then physically, his own power as far as maybe a strong man, he threw the money changers out of the temple in John chapter 2. Now, there's some speculation that they were stone tables and Jesus was a carpenter of stone. There's some validity to that. It's possible that he was a very strong man. And so this was like, in his anger, he personally and human capabilities threw over the tables and chased the people out, right? But the other thing is the obvious fact that either his strength or just the force of character that he had to go in there and do this made more than just a few men fear him and run away. I mean, there were money changers, tables laid up. You had the accountants, the counters, you had the sheep herders, you had the guys with the bankers, you had all these different groups of people, and Jesus threw them all out. They could have easily just grabbed him and stopped him, right? But no, he was obviously strong, obviously scared them, and it wasn't just godly power. It was physical attributes that he exhibited as a hero, going in for a cause greater than himself and doing a great feat, a feat of strength even in this case. So personally, I'm content with the 4 Gospels showing all the miraculous powers of Jesus to say, hey, he did miracles, he's a hero, right? I know that they are authoritative and historically reliable, but for those who reject the Gospels, saying they're just biased accounts because Christians wrote them, you have to also understand the historical veracity of these alongside all the other documents. For historical accuracy, it only takes like one document, one ancient manuscript to prove something is true among historians, okay? If you can validate one manuscript, you're good. Well, we have all of these Christian documents, almost 30,000 manuscripts that make up all these Gospels and the epistles and things like that. But we have extra biblical sources that talk about his miraculous deeds as well. And here's the thing why I want to bring this up. The enemies of Christ wrote about his miracles. They admitted that Jesus was a miracle worker. So when an enemy is willing to admit that their opponent has done something great, that is a very strong indicator that it's true. Because enemies don't put people up, their opponents up on a pedestal and say that they've done great things. So if they admit it, it's a non-biased, grudging admission of a fact. You see what I'm getting at? So that's why I want to bring these up. The fact that Jesus did miraculous, heroic, godlike things. All right. So here's one, the Babylonian Talmud. Now, this reference to Jesus demonstrates how Jews negatively viewed Jesus. As Jesus' enemies, they didn't want to paint Jesus in a positive light. So instead of saying he did miracles from God, they accused him of sorcery, because that was their only explanation for miracles, things that humans couldn't do, right? So here's one of the quotes from it. It says, "On the eve of the Passover, Jesus was hanged. For 40 days before the execution took place, a herald went forth and cried, 'He is going forth to be stoned because he has practiced sorcery and enticed Israel to apostasy. Anyone who can say anything in his favor, let him come forward and plead on his behalf.' But since nothing was brought forward in his favor, he was hanged on the eve of the Passover." That's from the Babylonian Talmud, written approximately AD 70. Then we have Josephus. And he wrote in the first century, late after Jesus was already passed away, or dead and rose again and disappeared. Because remember, Jesus went back to heaven in the clouds. So Josephus indicates that Jesus was a miracle worker. Now, Josephus was a Jew who was being paid as a historian by the Romans. So he was in Rome. Josephus rejected the idea that Jesus was the Messiah. So he wouldn't give Jesus unnecessary credit for miraculous powers, right? So this is very unique that Josephus, as a Jew in the employment of the Roman emperor, a historian, would write this down. Here's what he said, quote, "At this time there appeared Jesus, a wise man, for he was a doer of startling deeds, a teacher of people who received the truth with pleasure, and he gained a following among many Jews and among many of Greek origin." A doer of startling deeds. That should kind of give you an indication that he did heroic deeds, because Josephus, again, would not want to say that. Then we have an anti-Christian text. This was written approximately 400 AD, and it's anti-Jesus, very strictly anti-Jesus. But this text is basically full of unsupported legends, but it's a Jewish document. And at the very least, what it says here demonstrates that Jesus had the reputation of a miracle worker among the Jewish population. So you got to read the whole text to find out, what it's all about, but it's entirely anti-Jesus, refers to Jesus as a bastard, accuses him of sorcery, claims that he never rose from the dead, a gardener stole his body, but it recognizes Jesus' power to heal. This is the Toledat Yeshu. And in the text, it states that Jesus raised a dead person to life, made clay birds to fly, and caused a millstone to float on water. In addition, it says this, quote, "They therefore brought to him, Jesus, a lame man who had never walked. Yeshu spoke over the man the letters of the ineffable name, and the leper was healed. Thereupon they worshipped him as the Messiah, Son of the Highest." So a very anti-Jesus, anti-Christian Jewish writer is saying this guy did miracles. He healed people and he raised people from the dead. That's the Toledat Yeshu. And then there's another one, I believe this is a historian, Celsus. He despised Christianity and spoke very poorly of Jesus. One point is extremely important that he says in here, this was about AD 175, he denies that Jesus got power from God, but he admits that Jesus did miracles. And here's what he says when he's talking about Jesus' mother, and he says a lot of horrible things, but it says, quote, "She gave birth to Jesus, an illegitimate child, who having hired himself out as a servant in Egypt on account of his poverty, and having there acquired some miraculous powers, on which the Egyptians greatly pride themselves, returned to his own country, highly elated on account of them, and by means of these proclaimed himself a god." So again, enemies of Christ admitting that he had power, miraculous powers, brought people back from the dead, healed people. That's just 4 extra biblical accounts of people who admit that Jesus did miracles. So very clearly, Jesus fits that attribute of a hero. All right. The other part would be his nobility and his honor and courage. So Jesus' noble sacrifice Obviously, his emotional stress and anguish through his whole life, he spent his whole life knowing what he came to do. And that culminates at the Garden of Gethsemane when he's praying and he tells God the Father that he knows what's about to happen. Luke 22:42. This is Jesus praying, and he says, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling to the ground. Now, again, Luke is talking about this, being a doctor, and it has been since proven in the modern age that great stress will actually cause, I'll probably say this wrong because I'm not a doctor, but the capillaries near your skin that your pores, your sweat pores are located at, when you are extremely stressed, those can actually all burst and blood will come out of your sweat pores. So that is a scientific fact based off of medically proven levels of stress. So extreme stress. Well, that's what Jesus was experiencing because what? He knew what was about to happen on the cross. And then, of course, don't forget, as a man, 100% man, he was literally tempted by the devil. Matthew 4. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward a-hungered. And then we know, of course, leading up to the resurrection, his torture and death on the cross. That's described in John 19 and Matthew 27. So when I say Jesus' noble sacrifice, I'm saying he knew all this was going to happen and he willingly let it happen. And Isaiah 52 explains how horrible that torture was. And it says in verse 13, Behold, my servant will prosper. He will be raised and lifted up and highly exalted. Just as many were appalled at him, his appearance was disfigured beyond that of any man, and his form was marred beyond human likeness. Had he been a selfish man, he would have avoided the torment. But Jesus chose to suffer so that we don't have to. Matthew 26:51. And behold, one of them which were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck a servant of the high priests and smote off his ear. Then said Jesus unto him, Put up again the sword into his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then shall the scriptures be fulfilled, that thus it must be? So that leads us to the point of, not only was he a hero, not only did he have noble intentions and know what was going to happen and chose to do it anyways, which is far more than what most humans would do, but it was for a greater cause. And that's the thing about heroes. They are willing to die, give up their own life selflessly for something greater than themselves, either for another person or for a cause greater than themselves. So Jesus did it, of course, to save humanity from hell. And here's where a lot of people screw things up. You'll hear all the time that people will say, well, why does God send people to hell? Well, that's kind of backwards. Because of Satan, because of the fall of Adam and Eve in the garden, choosing to sin against God, all of humanity is doomed. We are going to hell when we're born. We deserve hell because you can't be in heaven next to a holy God if you're sinful. Well, we're all sinful. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So God had a plan. This is the cause of why Jesus died on the cross and rose again. God had a plan from the very beginning on how to save us from that destiny. We are destined to hell. And God's like, nope, I'm going to send my son to pay the eternal price of damnation, separated from God. If you read the story of when Jesus died on the cross, God the Father turned his face from him. The sun went dark for 3 hours. And Jesus, for the first time, was separated from that triune God. Him being God was like split off of God and separated. So Jesus experienced that separation from God the Father, paid the penalty of death, bleeding his own, I can't even think of the words, God blood. He's an eternal God, the eternal God, that shed his blood for all of eternity so that individual humans don't have to die to pay the debt of sin. And that's his purpose. That's his cause. So it was ultimately the reason Jesus chose to die on the cross was to do God's will. We already read Luke 22:42. But 2 Timothy 1:9 says, who hath saved us, Jesus, and called us with a holy calling, not according to our works, but according to his own purpose and grace, which was given us in Christ Jesus before the world began. God's will, God's cause, God's purpose in Jesus' death before the world began was to save us. And Jesus was willing to lower his status as God and become a mere human to do it. Philippians 2:4-9 says, look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. And my note on that is because he was God, right? Verse 7, but made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Wherefore God also hath highly exalted him and given him a name which is above every name. That's a true hero's journey. Not just risking his life, but knowing he's giving his life when he does it. That's like a suicide mission, right? And the torture that he went through for that, no human, you would not do that. That would be so difficult to do for a loved one, let alone for people you've never met or who haven't been born yet. So what's the conclusion of all this? Jesus had heroic feats of power and strength. He fought the devil. He fought established religion. He fought the temple. He fought actual people, flipped over the tables. His strength of character to do this for 3 years without any support, without demanding any money. His power over nature, power over life and death, and of course, ultimately raising himself from the dead. Look, no truthful person denies the horrific death of Jesus Christ on the cross. It is reality that crucifixion is an artfully crafted torture to sustain human life as long as possible under duress. It was perfected by the Romans, and it is verifiable, historically proven fact that this Jesus of Nazareth was murdered this way. What makes it noble and heroic is that Jesus knew of it beforehand. There are at least 4 first-hand accounts in the Gospels that record Jesus talking about his coming death and deciding to follow through with it anyways. So this cause that Christ died for and rose again for can be ours if we so choose. We can become a soldier in his army. 2 Timothy 2, verse 1. Thou therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Jesus Christ. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit to faithful men who shall be able to teach others. Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. And then it says in verse 7, consider what I say, and the Lord give thee understanding in all things. Remember that Jesus Christ of the seed of David was raised from the dead. So we can be part of something bigger than ourselves. Read Hebrews 11, a history of brave men and women that spans thousands of years for this cause. Our higher calling is described in Philippians 3:13 and 14. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. Jesus Christ is the ultimate hero. Give him the hero worship that he deserves. He's not dead. He is risen. Happy Resurrection Day. And until next time, keep searching for the truth. Thanks for sticking around, guys. I just wanted to share something with you that God answers prayers. We kind of had one happen for our family. A lot of things going on financially here. Sometimes it's tough, and you guys probably have gone through the same things, but we needed a new computer for my wife's job. She'd like to have a bicycle. My 7-year-old started riding a bike without training wheels, and she just freaking loves it and wants to go on bike rides all the time. But we don't have a bike. We didn't have money for an emergency fund. Our car kept breaking down. It's been nothing but trouble. Radiator leaked, brakes were bad, suspension bad, windshield was cracked. We needed a new windshield. The other day it blew a head gasket. We had to have it pushed home. We just wanted to be rid of it, be done with it, right? So she and I prayed, and lo and behold, just a quick online search, a local dealership gave us $2,000 for it. Kelley Blue Book and other online tools suggested a value of like $400 to $1,700. They called me and gave me $2,000 for this vehicle, which was a huge blessing because it would have been so hard to sell it on Craigslist and have people come to the house and check it out and stuff like that when it didn't even run. So the point is this: we no longer have a troublesome car. My wife is getting a new computer tomorrow and a bike. We have money for emergencies now. We'll have almost $1,000 set aside just in case of emergencies. So we got multiple answers to prayer in one. So that was pretty cool. But in regards to that, if you think about it, pray for us. Of course, we need a new family car. Don't have the money for it, but at least we have an emergency fund. And I wanted to point out financial stuff. As a financial planner, you guys can always contact me if you need advice. I do contacts over Zoom, and it's free. I don't charge anything, but I can always help you all the way from, negotiating interest rates to your credit card, paying off debt, saving up for college, and specifically investing for retirement, life insurance, the whole 9 yards. I do everything as a financial planner or strategist, and I never charge a dime. But you should have $1,000 in an emergency fund. I would highly recommend a high yield savings account. Go to bankrate.com. Click on the banking tab at the top and then choose high yield savings accounts and pick one and get an online account. Personally, I use an americanexpress.com, and you really need to understand the benefits of compounding interest. Your local bank probably pays you 0.1% interest, which is nothing. Pennies a year, right? Well, on $1,000, if you get 3% interest and it's compounded, you're going to earn like $30, $40, $50 a year, depending on the rate that you get. And, the story of the stewards, the 3 stewards, where God said, at the very least, you should have put your money in the bank and earned interest. I would rather earn $40 than 4 cents. That is one of the mildest things you can do as a good steward of what God has given you. So try and save up $1,000 for an emergency fund and put it in a high yield savings account. If you need help, feel free to contact me, okay? angrypatriot42@yahoo.com, and keep searching for truth, guys. God bless you all.